I had heard online that there was a cult following for this film, but after making a 1-minute reel version of my previous commentary, having watched it a couple of times, it ended up being the most viewed video, second only to Roger Corman's Fantastic Four, which apparently has a slightly bigger cult following. This is 1986, Solarbabies. Given the amazing response to the video and the fact that I had just rewatched it and I was thinking a lot about it, I thought I would do a longer form again and revisit the Solarbabies. So the Solarbabies movie, you can find all sorts of criticism online about it. It is very clunky. It is almost, well, it's quite nonsensical by the end. Now, critics have said, cynics have said, they stole every sort of sci-fi thing, shoved it in there, and never made sense of it. On the other hand, you could build this out to a very elaborate universe. What exactly is happening in Solarbabies? It begins kind of like a roller ball, but less violent for teens. It's roller derby ball lacrosse, and you think it's going to be a futuristic sports movie in that genre. Then we find the magic sphere, and it's going to be a magic sphere film. It's going to be an escape from tyranny film, eco-warrior film. Each step that we learn something new, it seems like the movie's going a different direction. Trying to put it together, you would have to do at least like a trilogy or maybe a quadrilogy or something of this story, because I think all the pieces fit. And because we don't get time on screen, maybe they are just thrown up there, but given enough time to think about it, all the pieces fit. So what exactly is going on with Solarbabies? I have a fan theory of my very own. Here comes the fan theory. In the not so distant future, the loss of water leaking out into space or per environmental catastrophe means that the human race can no longer sustain itself technologically. A decision would have to be made then in order to preserve our technology for useful purposes, that you would have most of the human race live without the technology in their daily lives and create little oases under an energy protectorate where you would have modern power systems that could be for research laboratories, inventing and making medications, medical technology, space technology, whatever, where technology could still thrive, but where the bulk of the human race would live without it, essentially. Imagine this goes on for some generations, but the people who control the technological outlets, those folks become a new sort of elite who decide that they're going to keep adding on to their facility for their family and friends. They're going to keep modernizing their life, let the rest of the planet become a desert, because they're convinced that they will develop enough technology to exist permanent long term like this if they let the planet die and the rest of the human race die. This would explain the split between the E-police, between the protectorate and the population. We see the cave drawing, the cave painting of people on horseback, eco-warriors fighting against the protectorate. By the time this split, divide culturally led to hostility, the people who'd been living without the technology and not having access to it wouldn't know how to use it if they had it. They've been reduced to an almost aboriginal state, and their attempts then to defeat the protectorate means trying to overwhelm them with numbers and doing things like attacking with primitive weapons and on horseback. The protectorate defeating these people, a couple of things would happen further down the line, which explain what we see in the film also. We see the Chiganis, the tribal people that live out in the wasteland around little pockets of civilization where used to be garbage dumps, right? We see some places like Tire City have their own industry for developing water, apparently allied or working with the protectorate, while others are living a very stereotypical on the surface sort of aboriginal existence. But having given up direct conflict with the protectorate, they're allowed to live out there in the wastes in this primitive way. It would explain why we don't see any roving tribal groups on horseback. the climate continuing to decline and the lack of water, they're not feeding those animals. Those beings are becoming extinct so that humans can use up more and more of the meager, have access to more and more of the meager remaining resources. Our friend Longinus, who's a confusing figure, we're told there's a sphere. According to legend, it comes from outer space, and it does come from outer space. According to legend, Longinus built it, but we find out he didn't build it. We would have to give him sort of a backstory that he was a scientist, part of the Protectorate, who did not like the tyranny they were building and excluding the rest of the human race from water and from protection, and went out on his own to try to develop a technology that could revive the water system on the planet. Why Bodhi turns out to be extraterrestrial would have to be a whole other story, that perhaps somewhere along the line, the forgotten technology of the SETI program or whatever, where he's in hiding, Longinus can't complete the technology, but he does actually hear back from extraterrestrials who want to help, who together then, putting their heads together, they send Bodhi to Earth to bring water. Something must have gone wrong that he ended up buried in a cavern. We never find Longinus. Some conflict with the Protectorate that kept the sphere contained underground, but lost. And knowing that it was out there, the Protectorate still fears that it will bring back the resources and they will lose control of the civilization. Oddly enough, I think with enough time, you can even explain things like roller skates and the fact that where they have the Protectorate chases after them with these off-road vehicles, right? These little mean-looking things that look like monster mines off of Jason the Wheeled Warriors, kind of. But they burst through the sand dunes and they're sort of all-terrain. But they're chasing these kids that are on this perfectly flat surface, or at least flat enough that they're able to roller skate the whole surface of the earth. And obviously this was sort of a 70s and 80s thing, the roller skate shtick, the dangly earrings, and I don't know, I was never into it. I never could stand up on them. But actually you could kind of explain that in the in-between phases where the Protectorate is hoarding resources and people are living a more primitive lifestyle, as horses are dying off and other means of transportation, that a logical, self-powered sort of system, we don't see any bicycles per se, but then there's a lot of manufacturing involved with that, whereas roller skating, maybe that is the way that they intended for people to get around without technology, and they built a whole lot of these reasonably flat roads out into no man's land, and that would be why at the final battle over Bodhi at the power company, the incomparable Sarah Douglas, who's amazing, being sort of wedged into this role, Terminac, this incredibly overthought machine that we get thrown at us at the very end. Again, it should have been in part 4, the quadrilogy. And everything in there has ramps, so the kids are able, the Solarbabies can attack the bad guys while completely on their roller skates. But maybe there is an explanation for that if they're intending that to be the primary self-propelled means of traveling more quickly than is natural, that replaces things that are powered by some sort of energy. So if I've forgotten anything or didn't think anything through, let me know. I want to hear your fan theories, because I'd like to have a discussion about it, because it's so popular, and every time I Google it, I find all of this crazy Reddits and stuff where people love this oddball film, and I'd like to hear more of their thoughts on it, because as it exists, you have to fill in the blanks yourself, or honestly, it's a really bad movie.